congratulating our national football team on a very historic win this morning. And like I said, a very glorious morning for us as we start. My name is Dino Punsami from the National School of Government, and it is indeed my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar this morning on reimagining public service productivity towards the National Development Plan 2030 and the African Agenda 2063. Let me take the opportunity to introduce you to our participants on the platform this morning. The program will be directed by my colleague, Ms. Mamelo Monacheng from the Department of Public Service and Administration, Dr. Sokela, also from the Department of Public Service and Administration, Professor Mello from the University of South Africa, Ms. Janse van Rensburg from Productivity South Africa, and Ms. Kole from the Presidency. Dear colleagues and participants, as we start this session this morning, I thought it's important that we begin with a question which sits very much at the center of our discussions for today. What does a productive public sector actually look like for us as the 65 million South Africans and for the 1.5 billion Africans who depend on this public sector? It's not a simple question to answer, and for many of us, we look at how to measure productivity in the public sector, perhaps by the quality of education that a child receives, or access to a social grant by a senior citizen, or employment of an unemployed youth. Therefore, I think for productivity, it is fundamentally a developmental and moral obligation that is placed on us, for all of us who have to fulfill this. I'd like to remind you that in the 2026 budget speech, our Minister of Finance spoke about the attainment of the progressive realization of fundamental socioeconomic rights. And for that to happen, we have to make prudent fiscal choices. A key facet, he argued, of macroeconomic stability is the prudent fiscal management that advances social obligations, accelerates economic growth through public investment, improves the efficiency of public spending, and entrenches sustainable public finances. For us to ensure economic growth and job creation, we need a highly productive public sector. Colleagues, we gather today in the spirit of Africa Public Service Day, an event that is observed annually across the continent. And this year's theme speaks to assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. The connection of our webinar this morning is therefore not incidental. The Agenda 2063 envisions a continent that is integrated, prosperous, and peaceful, one where capable, professional, and productive public institutions are the engine of transformation. Safe water and sanitation are delivered by the very same public officials working within these functional and productive systems. Equally, South Africa's own National Development Plan shares the same ambition. Against this backdrop, the Presidency, the National School of Government, and the Department of Public Service and Administration, working with other partners, undertook a collaborative study on public service productivity, focusing on how we measure public service productivity robustly and comprehensively, and how does this compare against our international standards. The findings, colleagues, are instructive. We know we do have an existing framework, but it has not been consistently implemented or understood across the public sector. It does not reflect fully the integrated whole of government orientation that is required. When we deal with productivity issues, it's a multidimensional approach that should be addressing issues of efficiency, effectiveness, equity in how we access services, but importantly, the resilience of public sector institutions. I can say that the review arrives at a particularly opportune moment for us in South Africa. We now have two pieces of legislation signed by the President of our country that fundamentally reshape the architecture of public administration. The Public Service Amendment Act and the Public Administration Management Act have now become the legislative commitments towards professionalizing the public sector. A reviewed framework, therefore, aligns with these legislative provisions, and they become critical instruments for operationalizing productivity. Professionalization, colleagues, without a productivity anchor would not become a genuine performance improvement mechanism for us. As the National School of Government, we have direct and substantive interest in this agenda. Our mandate to build public servants' capabilities means productivity improvement is the outcome that is expressed in the quality and the impact of every learning intervention that we design and deliver. As we implement the professionalization framework aligned with our offerings and expanded mandate, we do so with the conviction that a productive public sector is a capacitated, capable, and accountable public sector. We are privileged this morning to be joined by a panel that brings together government, academia, and the productivity sciences. From the panel inputs, we invite your participation to engage with us actively. The value of this conversation is what lies in the collective reflection and what emerges from these as part of this institutional knowledge that the agenda seeks to achieve. Allow me to close by affirming a conviction that a capable, professional, and productive public sector is the foundation on which every other aspiration rests. It is the public officials who translate ambition into delivery and policy into changed lives. I therefore wish all of us a productive and purposeful engagement, and I thank you for the time again that you have joined us for this webinar. I'd like to take the opportunity to wish all of our panelists well in the presentations and the deliberations, and I would like to now hand over to our program director, Ms. Mabelo Monageng. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dino Punsami, for that comforting message and for clapping our hands to the Bafana team who have done us proud this morning. Colleagues, welcome to our webinar. Mr. Punsami has introduced the topic in terms of why we are having this conversation this morning. I want to take you again into the program and have us reflect on why we are here today. The commemoration for today is a capacity building conversation that we are having, and we are doing so being hosted by the Department of Public Service and Administration in partnership with the National School of Government. This is part of the 2026 APSD capacity building conversation that we are having. You would note that tomorrow we will be celebrating or commemorating the 23rd through a packed agenda where we will be reflecting on the theme in terms of the continental AU theme as well as the APSD theme. This conversation that we are having today is also being held within or under the theme Enhancing Public Sector Institutions and Empowering Multi-Stakeholder Partnership to Achieve Universal Water Availability and Safe Sanitation by 2063. Our role within the public service is then to see how do we create an ecosystem that enables the country plans to achieve the commitments and the aspirations of the 2063 agenda, including the Sustainable Development Goals. In saying that, colleagues, we look to our conversation today to emphasize one of the pressing challenges that we are having of making sure that we build a public service that is able to create an ecosystem that can make sure that we have water, we have access to clean water and dignified sanitation. To enhance our public sector institutions, we have curated a well-developed topic that will help us to understand how we can play a decisive role in creating that ecosystem. We having this conversation to explore ways to strengthen productivity, improve efficiency, and modernize public administration. The colleagues would realize that our 2024 to 2029 MTDP agenda is focused on improving efficiency, the ease of doing business, and productivity of the public service. And one of its indicators is to measure the level of productivity in departments, setting ourselves a threshold of a minimum of 80% on how we deliver services to the public service. Obviously, that is becoming our baseline with the intention to mature, to begin to deliver at 100%, and we begin to move beyond the 100% into the excellence space. But to help us to understand more about this topic, colleagues, we have in our midst remarkable individuals, distinguished experts in their own field who are passionate about the subject. We will hear from them in terms of the work that they have been doing in this area and what we can learn for ourselves in terms of how the public service is fashioned to take the challenge of improving productivity forward, as well as how we can begin to fashion and modernize our institutions to make sure that we are ready to improve productivity in the areas that we work. Colleagues, I will not be taking much of your time in terms of going into the topic itself. We have the panel that will be presenting on some of the areas that we believe can help us to understand what it is that we talk about when we say productivity in the public service. Like the former speaker, Mr. Dino Ponsami, indicated, this is not a first conversation that is being held. Last year, there was a conversation that was held, and much of the work and the responses from the panel will be reflecting on what has been done to date and what is it that we are looking forward to do going forward. And you'll find that the program is fashioned in that manner that we will then begin to reflect on what is academia saying to us in terms of productivity in the public service. We will move into the productivity in general in terms of how the country is measuring against the world and the things that we are doing to begin to improve our ratings in that area. We will move into reflecting on the reports and the recommendations that were presented last year on how and what we need to do to make sure that we come up with a framework for the public service that can guide all of us on how we need to improve our efficiency and our effectiveness to make the ease of doing business with the state realized as the agenda of the current administration. Colleagues, join me in welcoming our first speaker, who will reflect for us on productivity from the academic perspective and reflecting on the work that they have done to see what is happening in the public service. I have in our midst Prof. David Mbati-Mello, the Acting Director, Academic Programs within the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. I'm going to welcome Prof. Miller to then take over with the presentation in addressing the public service on his topic. Colleagues, as per the program, and I'm not sure if we have flighted it already, we will take the presentations, all of them, and then we will take a discussion on what has been presented. Whilst the speakers are on the floor, you are welcomed to type your chats, your questions on the chat box, so that when we come into the discussion space, we are able to reflect on those. I'm sure they will also, some of them, be responded to whilst on the chat box. If not so, we will bring them back into the plenary so that we are able to then respond to those questions actively. Prof. Miller, can I welcome you to the stage, sir? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mamello Monageng, for the warm welcome as well as the introduction. My role in this webinar is to focus on the current state of productivity in the public sector with specific reference to the conceptualization and measurement. But I thought that for me to be able to do justice to this topic, I should also reflect on the main theme. If we are saying towards 2030, means we're talking about our own national development plan. If we're talking about towards Agenda 2063, it means that we're talking about Africa as a whole. And we are an integral part of Africa. And therefore, perhaps one may have to start with doing a reflection on Africa. And perhaps start with questions. And these questions are, at a continental level of Africa, are we doing well? Having asked that question at a continental level, we also have to come to the level of South Africa and say, at the level of South Africa, are we doing well? Now, these two questions require us to be very brutally honest with ourselves in our reflection, to do a very honest assessment in terms of the progress that we are making, the challenges that we are facing as the African continent, as well as the Republic of South Africa. Having done that, I'll then come down to South Africa and say, in terms of the measurement, how are we doing? And then I'll reflect on the productivity study that was done in South Africa, that was initiated by the president as well as the National School of Government. And then I'll tease out this concept of productivity. What does it mean within the context of the public service? Now, going back to Africa, Africa as a continent, you'd realize that we're talking about a continent that has got about 1.5 billion people. And out of over 8 billion people in the whole world, meaning that we are 18% of the total population of the world. But being a country and a continent that has had a number of problems. How are we doing in terms of productivity? Now, when we look at the population, we estimate that the population of Africa may double by the year 2050. And then the question that we have to ask ourselves is this doubling of the population equal to the productivity that is required? Is it equal to the development that we would like to see as the African continent? Now, when you do a comparison of continents on a number of aspects, including growth as well as economic development, the overall development index, you'd realize that most challenges are actually to be found in Africa. Now, when you look at the 46 least developed economies around the world, you realize that 33 of them are found in Africa. The sad reality about Africa, and perhaps also South Africa, is that we have between 10 and 12 million African youth that enter the labor market every year in Africa. But out of this 10 to 12 million, only 3 million can be absorbed into the labor market. Now, that leaves us with a question again, whether we are doing well. Now, comparatively speaking, you realize that when you look at us, you look at Europe, you look at Asia, we are not doing well. And in fact, when you look at Africa and you compare it with some of the Asian countries, you would realize that around 1990, countries such as Lesotho, Nigeria, Madagascar, as well as Zambia, were on or more or less on the same level with China, Vietnam, as well as Indonesia, in as far as development is concerned, in as far as specifically the levels of poverty. But those countries were able to move from the higher levels of poverty, which in some instances were up to 70%. They were able to reduce them to about 1%, 1.0%, and 19%. Now, what we need to ask ourselves is, where are the bottlenecks in as far as Africa is concerned? What is it that we're doing right? What is it that we're doing wrong in as far as development is concerned? And when we talk about productivity, when we talk about these underlying challenges that I've mentioned, development, poverty, unemployment, you realize that sometimes government may say that governments doesn't have the responsibility to create jobs. But I also want to argue against that particular sentiment, that while the government can indeed not be the only creator of jobs, the government of the day has got the responsibility to ensure that it provides an enabling environment within which the private sector, the individuals, can be able to create the much needed jobs. And therefore, it means that in terms of productivity, government is also very central to the economic development or the overall development through the services that it provides. And in fact, interestingly, while we spoke about Agenda 2063, we had an engagement with some youth in Tanzania last year. And it was an engagement about development as well. And the youth, in fact, told us, it looks like you're wasting our time if you're talking about Agenda 2063. And in fact, one of the youth actually told us that what we need is agenda now. And this statement by a youth in Tanzania actually opened my eyes to say that the youth is actually saying that there is some agency that we need to treat this issue of productivity in Africa as well as within the borders of South Africa as well. Now, when we look at how we are doing in South Africa, I actually wrote an article with a colleague of mine in our work as the editorial committee of the Journal of Public Administration. And we looked at what we say was the discord between public policy and results. And in some instances, we have policies that are very good, looking very good on paper, but when it comes to implementation, that is where we have challenges. Meaning that, again, this is an emphasis on the need to urgently look at this aspect of productivity. Now, in the productivity study that I have mentioned, that was commissioned by the presidency as well as the National School of Government, we actually also looked at the legislation in South Africa. And perhaps my starting point should be the Constitution. Now, when you look at the Constitution, you look at Section 195 in particular, you realize that that particular section of the Constitution, which is about public administration, it also makes mention of specific concepts that relate to productivity. Section 195 talks about the effectiveness and efficiency in the provision of public service or in the general administration of the state. Now, we also looked at other pieces of legislation in our comprehensive study. And what we have realized was that in South Africa, productivity is not a concept that is very popular. We tend to shy away from productivity and talk about effectiveness and efficiency. And that we were able to see in a number of pieces of legislation that has been passed by most South African public sector institutions at the national sphere of government. Now, the issue of measurement is something that the public service have tried for quite some time. But the question is, in our measurements, were we measuring productivity or were we just measuring other things? Perhaps when the time comes for me to then elaborate on the concept of productivity, we will then understand whether we're missing the point in terms of our measurements in the past or we're doing the right thing. Now, in terms of the measurements that we have done in the past historically, we realized that we would do the customer satisfaction. We will do surveys where we ask members of the public about their perceptions of the public service, particularly with regard to service delivery. And that is done by universities, that is done by research institutions in South Africa. We also have looked at the frequency of complaints, because the more complaints you get, the more we then know that there are things that are not going well. We have tried as the public service to measure the turnaround time in as far as responding to queries. We have also looked at the regular as well as the quality of maintenance of infrastructure. And I must say that on that one, we are not doing well. Now, if we look at these individual yardsticks that we have used, have we really measured productivity? Now, productivity is something to me, as somebody who has read more about it, but it has got a different meaning to a member of the public. To a member of the public, productivity is about the end product. Productivity is about whether the public service responds to the needs of a member of the public, and is the public service responding timelessly. And that would be the conception of productivity in the eyes of a member of the public. Now, in a study that we have done in terms of the discord between policy and results, we also looked at a number of aspirational goals that the National Development Plan has put across and said, these are aspirational goals by 2030. And I do understand the concept of aspirational goal. But when one look at these goals very closely, one then realizes that we are already missing these goals, not by a small margin. And therefore it means that we need to reevaluate the way we're doing our business in terms of our assessment of productivity. Now, in two studies, the one study is actually on productivity as a frontier in the South African public service. This is the report that was commissioned again by the presidency as well as the National School of Government. In that report, we did comparison between Canada, Rwanda, as well as Singapore. And unfortunately, on a number of matrices, these countries were beating us hands down. Meaning that, again, we have to accept this reality that when it comes to the effectiveness of the public service, we were not doing well against these three countries, Canada, Rwanda, as well as Singapore. Well, it could be argued that perhaps Canada is in a league of its own. Singapore is in a league of its own. But when you look at Rwanda, you will realize that Rwanda is one of those countries that I will say have risen from the ashes. In 1994, when we were celebrating our independence as well as democracy, Rwanda was in mourning. Rwanda was at a point of disintegrating because you had genocide there. But when you look at our comparison, you then realize that Rwanda was able to improve much quicker than we could. And you know, the reality is that South Africa and its institutions was part of those people who went to help Rwanda in terms of training and other things. And off they went, they surpassed us in a number of indices. So that again is about us having to do an honest reflection and say, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? I also did an article with a colleague of mine, Professor Paho, as an editorial note in the Journal of Public Administration. And the title of that article was Effectiveness and Efficiency, the Achilles heel of public administration as it leaps into the artificial intelligence era. Now, in this article, we actually thought that because the productivity study that was commissioned by the presidency as well as the National School of Government compared South Africa with countries that are outside the continent. And we thought perhaps let's do an intra-Africa comparison. Now, when we do this intra-Africa comparison, we picked our neighbor, Botswana. We picked Egypt. We picked Rwanda again. And the idea was also just to check the performance of South Africa on only one aspect, the effectiveness of the public service. Now, when we look at the effectiveness of the public service, we actually again realized that, and in fact, in this study, we used the data from the World Bank. We use what is known as the World Bank comparator. Now we imputed the four countries, Botswana, Egypt, Rwanda, as well as South Africa, into this software. And it gave us the results from 2002 until 2023. That is the latest data that we could get. And when we look at this latest data, in 2002, South Africa was the leader in as far as government effectiveness is concerned. But between 2002, South Africa has seen a downward spiral. I've already spoken about Rwanda, that Rwanda raised itself from the ashes, and it was able to surpass us. When we look at Egypt, Egypt was also not doing well, but was doing better than than Rwanda. But Rwanda was able to surpass Egypt in terms of the effectiveness index that we have looked at. And therefore, it implies that there is a possibility that you may be able to improve as a country if there is a will. Now, in South Africa, the Department of Public Service and Administration also have got a very interesting framework. It's a framework that we can work on, that we can improve on, to make sure that we are competitive in relation to other African countries. Although the aim is not to compete, the aim is to make sure that we are doing better every year in terms of the delivery of services to members of the public. Now, let me talk to this issue of productivity. When we look at the concept of productivity, we realize that across the scholarship and literature, there is actually no one definition of productivity. Academics differ. And when they differ, it means that as South Africa, we also need to adopt our own definition. And when we define productivity, we must realize that productivity principles in the private sector and the public sector may be the same. But what is important is that the environments are different. And therefore, we need to look at the nuances that are available in as far as the conceptualization of productivity in the public sector. Now, when we look at productivity, we realize that for us to talk about productivity, we have to understand the entire value chain. Productivity within the public sector is about value creation. Productivity in the public sector is more about the output that we have, the output that is generated on the basis of a specific unit of an input. It means that when we look at the input, the private sector will be talking about something different. But in the case of the public sector, when we talk about the inputs that have to come into the productivity value chain, we have to take into consideration the inputs that are made by members of the public, because they have to shape what we define as productivity. You would realize that in as far as the outputs are concerned within the context of the public sector, we cannot just talk about outputs in terms of the numbers as well as quality. Within the public sector, we have to look at the broader perspective of the impact. We are doing well in terms of the value chain, but the services that we provide, are they having a good impact in as far as the public sector is concerned? And therefore it implies that the equation could be the same in the private sector as well as the public sector in terms of the inputs and the outputs. But in terms of value creation, it is different. Measurement is not easy also in the public sector because of the nature of services that are provided by the public sector in general. I've been given up to now in terms of my presentation, but I believe that if public service institutions work together with a centralized institutions such as the DPSA, as well as the National School of Government, we can be able to improve the levels of productivity in South Africa. Chairperson, thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Mello, for
Chairperson,
such an insight.
Chairperson, kindly enable your video, please.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Madam Coulson. I think for a while there, I forgot that. Thank you for that. Am I visible?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies to the House. I think I omitted that at the start. But thank you for reminding me, our webinar champion, Madam Coulson. Prof, thank you so much for such an enriching knowledge that you've shared with us. There's been a number of issues that you raised that we will just quickly reflect on and remind our audience that we are not going to take questions at this stage. You are, however, able to post your question on the chat. We will have a slot after all the three speakers have presented to then go through the questions, and they will then be responding to them accordingly during that time. We're using this method to try and manage our time in terms of making sure that we get to hear as much as we can from our experts so that we are then able to engage at a later stage. Prof, some of your key elements that you have reflected on, and that's not necessarily an exhaustive list, but just to keep the House focused in terms of what you have indicated. There's been a number of questions that you ask us in relation to the number of studies that you have conducted. I think we are beginning to add to our vocabulary when we say public service productivity management, looking at some of the issues that you have raised, the overall development index that you are making reference to, which is something that we have to begin to understand and see how that relates to the work that we do as a public service. How are we rated in that development index? I think you also raised the issue of the centrality of government to economic development through the services it provides. From my side, there is a new term which is hashtag agenda now that you told us that the youth are now bringing. It's no more the far-looking 2063, is to say, what are we doing now? And that speaks to the urgency that also underlies the theme for 2063 in terms of providing access as well as dignity to sanitation that provides dignity. So the urgency, Prof, it's something that we have underlined from your speech, and it's coming out very often in all our conversations to say we need to move with speed in making sure that we do what we need to do. You've mentioned the discord between public policy and results. We've noted that. I hope our public servants are also reflecting on that. You've touched on our Supreme Law, on what it says about productivity. You've reflected on what is it that we measure, or what has been our past measurements, and what are the things that we've been looking at, whether they are bringing us closer to closing the gap. The urgency was again once more reflected on the period that we have in terms of our NDP, the 4 years that we are remaining with, and how far we are from meeting our deliverables in this regard, meeting our milestone to make sure that we are able to improve our productivity. I think you have reflected on a number of pieces that is coming from your corner that we can familiarize ourselves with in understanding the work that you guys are doing to reflect the productivity in South Africa in comparison to our neighboring countries, including the South Asia. Nuances on conceptualization, And I think the encouraging word that you have given us is that the work can be done. It is not easy, undoubtedly, looking at the variety of services, but it can be done. Colleagues, that was just a pickup on some of the issues that were reflected on by Prof. I'm hoping that you have noted your questions and you are busy putting them up there, if not yet already there. Without wasting any more time, we're gonna go into our second speaker. Like we said, the topics are very enriching and we hope to leave this house being more informed about what we talk about when we talk productivity in the public service. Colleagues, our next speaker is Madame Lalane Janse van Rensburg. She is the Executive Manager of Research, Innovation and Statistics at Productivity SA. She has held several leadership positions within Productivity SA over the past 15 years of service, including Executive Regional Operations, Acting Head of Human Resources, and now Executive of Research. Madame Lalane Janse van Rensburg holds a master's degree from the University of South Africa with a focus on incubation in South Africa. And she's currently pursuing her PhD in business management and administration at the University of Stellenbosch Business School. Madame Lalane Janse van Rensburg, the house allows me to call you to unmute yourself and address us in terms of who Productivity SA is and how do we relate to Productivity SA when we're talking public service productivity. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you so much, Ms. Monageng, and thank you for that beautiful announcement. And I'd like to thank specifically the DPSA for our long-standing partnership and for inviting us to this event, as well as the National School of Government. I have the pleasure of doing a presentation from Productivity SA about the state of productivity in South Africa.
Madam Lalane, may
Yes.
I just interject quickly? If we can just show your face in introductory and then we can move over to your presentation. Is that, thank you.
Certainly. Thank you so much. So yes, my name is Lelani, as you've indicated. I have been a part of the Productivity SA family for the past 15 years. I only have 15 minutes to dazzle you with a bit of information on the state of productivity in South Africa and in comparison to 70 other countries. So I do expect some questions. But yes, I would just like to again thank the organizers of this conference, as well as yourself, Ms. Monageng, the DPSA, and the National School of Government for our long-standing partnerships and for creating this opportunity and platform. I'm going to try and share. I'm going to stop my video, but yes, welcome. And I'll share my presentation, try to share it again.
Kindly keep your video enabled because we are live streaming on our YouTube channel. So please keep your video on. Thank you.
Oh, okay. It's not a problem. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm just going to, I was sharing and it stopped. I'm just going to try and share again. Just a second. Just put it in presentation mode. Okay, so just a bit of an outline on the presentation. As I said, I don't have a very long slot, but this is just basically what it's going to be about. A little introduction on productivity, and then we're going to focus on the state of productivity of South Africa in comparison to other countries. So Productivity SA is an entity of the Department of Employment Labour, and our mandate is to fulfill an economic responsibility of government, which is to promote employment, growth and productivity, thereby contributing to South Africa's socio-economic development. The entity delivers on this mandate with a focus on improved economic efficiency and productivity, creation of decent employment, and promoting social dialogue in the workplace. So just a little bit about us. Our vision is to lead and inspire productive and competitive South Africa. And our mission is to improve productivity by diagnosing, advising, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating solutions aimed at improving South Africa's sustainable growth, development, and employment through increased competitiveness. So we do this at a country level, a sectoral level, and an enterprise level. So we have core programs. So the first of the 3 core programs is called CIS, Competitiveness Improvement Services. And this program focuses on creating an enabling environment conducive to entrepreneurship. Furthermore, CIS supports South Africa's strategic objectives in scaling up efforts to promote long-term industrialization and transformation. Some of the programs in this CIS program, we look at the emerging sector, which is small and micro enterprises. So we have training programs and solutions, including business performance improvement. We like acronyms, so we call it BPI. Early warning systems, which is a component that we bring in all our programs. An early warning system so that you know which areas need to be, improved on. And then productivity champions training, which is a wonderful, intervention. Promoting a productivity culture and mindset, and then Kaizen training and projects. And please do visit our website for more information on this, because these projects use the Kaizen philosophy, step-by-step incremental improvements, improving in quality, productivity, cost, delivery, safety, and morale. And then we look at stable businesses, small, medium, and large. And also, again, the word Kaizen projects, which is the methodology that we use, and workplace transformation and export competitiveness programs, which we have in our portfolio as Productivity SA. So these programs typically range from 4 months to 12 months. We have on this slide the Business Turnaround and Recovery Program, and this program is funded by the UIF, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, and it's to save jobs. That's the vision of the program, to save jobs and create conditions for conducive job retention and job creation. And the intent of this program, and it should be very clear, is to provide non-financial assistance to different organizations and companies to increase their productivity, profitability, and service, as well as to save and retain existing jobs. A lot of information, as I said, is available on the website, but in a nutshell, implementing a turnaround strategy and plan to restructure and improve a business's efficiency and productivity, sustainable, competitive, and creative conditions conducive for job retention. It also focuses on sustaining existing jobs as a proactive solution by identifying inefficiencies in the business and solutions to ensure improved efficiencies and job retention. And then what we also do with this program is we establish and capacitate future forums, enterprise-based productivity forums, and training their members to establish early warning systems, that term I used previously, and to manage enterprise problems proactively. And then the unit that I represent, Research, Innovation, and Statistics, we aim to measure and evaluate productivity and competitiveness holistically across all levels, macro, sector, and micro, and to develop and maintain databases of this information, obviously to disseminate it, and to undertake and publish on productivity-related research and statistics. And I've decided with the next slides, as I'm going to go into them now, that we use one of these reports as a base for the presentation. So recent as part of our APP as Productivity SA, we publish 4 sector reports, and then in partnership with the IMD, we publish on an annual basis the IMD competitiveness rankings of the country, and we also publish statistics on productivity in South Africa annually. So I'm going to drill into this report just to intrigue you on our comparison as a country. So Productivity SA, in collaboration with the Institute of Management Development, based in Switzerland, launched the 2026 World Competitiveness Yearbook results on 19 June 2026, last week. And it is a globally recognized annual benchmarking report that assesses and ranks countries on their ability to create and sustain environments that enable enterprise competitiveness and productivity. So this slide just basically gives you a little bit of a snapshot on what is measured. So the competitive factors that are measured looks at government efficiency, economic performance, infrastructure, and business efficiency. And It focuses on the ability of a country to facilitate an environment in which enterprises can generate sustainable value. The methodology that's used, and this report is based on information from statistical data obtained from the international and national sources such as the World Bank, Stats SA, Reserve Bank, and then there's a qualitative perception survey obtained through an executive opinion. So perception, as I said, there's a qualitative component and a quantitative component, and the 2025 statistical data was used for this, and 2026 opinion survey. So this is what the report basically consists of. Again, just a snapshot on the methodology. You'll see here, two-thirds of this report is based on statistics, quantitative information, on economic performance, government efficiency, and a third of the information is based on a qualitative survey. And this is comparing South Africa to 7 other countries. So we're just going to look at the stats. So I'm pleased to report that according to the latest information that we launched on the 19th, South Africa ranked 54th out of 70 countries. And the reason I'm pleased to announce this is we have had a significant improvement from number 64 last year. So we improved 10 spaces. Now, comparator countries between 2025 and 2026 was Brazil. They went from 58 to 65th. India from 41 to 44. China from number 16 to number 12. You will see the comparison here. Botswana went from 59 to number 66. Nigeria went from 67 to 68. Ghana 61 to 64. Kenya 56 to 55, and Namibia 68 to 69. So there is movement, and this report, which is also available on the Productivity SA website, notes the top performing countries and the bottom performing countries, and also the movement and the escalations in between. So the top 5 nations: Singapore, they moved from 2nd to 1st, Hong Kong from 3rd to 2nd, and Switzerland from 1 to 3, Taiwan from 6 to number 4, and UAE went as constant on number 5. And on this slide, again, the focus area, South Africa improved its position in the latest report that we launched last week. This slide is just about, just looking at my time, the top 10 competitive countries are listed on this slide. And the slides can be shared for your perusal as well if you want to just have a look at that. So those are the top 10 competitive countries and the bottom 10 competitive countries on the scale. And I'll just go back to that slide. This is out of 7 countries that are participating in the IMD survey. Okay, so overall ranking for South Africa. We've had an improvement, and the next couple of slides just looks at the improvement in declines that we had. So from a overall score, I said we went from number 64 out of 69 countries, but we now have 70 participating countries. So we've now moved to number 54 out of 70 countries. Economic performance, a slightly downward move of 1. Government efficiency, great movement from number 63 to number 54. Business efficiency from number 57 to number 42. And infrastructure from number 62 to number 59. So we've had some improvements there. If we look at economic performance, we had a slight decline from number 63 to 64 in 2026. And domestic economies remained stable. On international trade, we had slight improvement, but on international investment, we dropped 4 spaces. On employment, we dropped 1 space, and prices remained constant. On government efficiency, there was, as I said, a significant improvement based on this survey and statistical data. So, as I said, we went from 63 to 54. Public finance, we moved up from 63 to 54. Tax policy, 2 spaces down. Institutional framework, We increased 10 spaces. Business legislation, we also increased significantly. And on scientific framework, we remained constant. On government efficiency, this slide, which I think you'd also find very interesting, we went from number 57 in 2025 to number 42 in 2026. So on productivity and efficiency, 63 went to 55. On labor market, we also significantly improved to 34. On finance, there's also been some improvement from 46 to 38. Management practices from 56 to 38, which is also quite significant. And attitudes and values, which is, and again, I'm going to say there is a large component of this is also qualitative perceptions, executive surveys. It improved from number 58 to 36. Infrastructure, on basic infrastructures, there is improvement. Technological infrastructure, on scientific infrastructure, slight decline. Health and environment, improvement, and the education, improvement. So this is just a little bit of a snapshot slide on South Africa's competitiveness landscape. And you will see from the slide the highlights and the areas that we, that require significant improvement. It's also been categorized. So if you look at, for instance, our tax policy is number 27, and this would be rated out of 70 countries. If we look at the labor markets, number 34, but on domestic economy, we're number 63. So this is just a snapshot. And this is a slide on our strengths and weaknesses. So looking at economic performance, government efficiency, business efficiency, and infrastructure. What is our strength areas and what is our weakness areas is also contained in this slide. Improvement and declines. We've also summarized this about the focus areas for improvement and the focus areas for declines. And this is just based on year on the survey. So if we look at for instance, under improvement, under public finances, that has been an improvement. Exchange and stability, slight improvement, and the like with declines as well. So interestingly enough, key attractiveness indicators, and I'm running out of time, but I'm not there yet. Key attractiveness indicators, I'll try to wrap up, and this is according to the perception survey, and I think it's important for us to know this, is how people perceive South Africa. Key attractiveness factors would be cost competitiveness, access to finance, quality of corporate governance, policy stability and predictability, business-friendly environment, open and positive attitudes, effective legal environment, dynamism of the economy, skilled workforce, high education levels, strong R&D culture, reliable infrastructure, effective labor relations, competitive tax regime, and competency of government. And this was conducted with the survey. So my last two slides. What drove the improvement? Because this is a significant improvement. The first one would be government efficiency rating. South Africa improved from 63 to 54. These results suggest confidence in aspects of the policy and institutional environment. In business efficiency, recorded the strongest improvement. South Africa improved from number 57 to 42. So these gains reflect more positive assessments by business respondents regarding the operating environment in which they function. And then infrastructure improved modestly from 62 to 59. And what remains a concern? Now, colleagues, in closing, economic performance remains South Africa's weakest pillar. South Africa declined slightly from 63 to 64, which is already it's a problem rating. But persistent weaknesses include unemployment at number 69 out of 70 countries measured. Youth unemployment at number 68. Gross fixed capital formation at 67, domestic savings at 60, and export of commercial services at 59. So these indicators continue to constrain economic competitiveness and long-term prospects. Productivity, although business efficiency improved, labor productivity remains relatively weak. So South Africa ranked number 52 in labor productivity. out of 70 countries. This reinforces the importance of productivity enhancing interventions to support competitiveness and sustainable economic growth. So thank you so much, Chair, for allowing me to share this presentation, and slightly go over my time with a minute, but there is a lot more information that we can share in this regard, but I thought it's valuable information for this session. Thank you so much.
Anne?
Kindly unmute. Program Director, kindly unmute.
Okay, am I winning with them unmuting?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Lelane, for that presentation. It has helped us to move from Prof that told us that it can be done to you saying we have a good base of improvement to build on. So some of the key things that I have underlined from your presentation, Madam, is that I think we are now better understanding who Productivity SA is and what they do. Some of the key vocabs that we have taken from your presentation, the Kaizen project. I'm sure we're going to hear more about the word Kaizen. You deal with workplace transformation, focus on turnaround strategies, identify inefficiencies, early warning systems that you spoke about. You also deal with issues that helps us to save jobs and job creation. I think the core of your presentation was about the annual IMD competitive ratings. Once again, we hear about indices that that are being used to measure. You have brought us into the global rating space in terms of the competitive factors. I think one of the key things that we take out is in terms of the measurement at the global space, you have 2/3 being made up of statistics and a third on qualitative survey. Good news for us, we have moved 10 spaces from 54. We improved when most African countries regressed. I think that's the information that we're also picking up. Of the 4 key indicators, we have increased, and voila, government efficiency is one of them. So we can probably pat ourselves on the shoulders to say we are doing something right. So our improvement does not move from 0, it moves from what has already been measured. And I think from your presentation, you were saying finance, management, and attitudes, they are contributing to that improvement. One of the other key issues is your indicators speaks to perception survey and what it measures. I think past on Prof's presentation, when he reflected on our past measurements, we could see the difference there in terms of what we were measuring and what the global space is measuring in terms of the perception survey. I think you highlighted also on what remains a concern. I think it's a subject very familiar to all of us, our economic performance. The issue that you have put on the table is that there is a case to improve productivity and enhance our interventions to make sure that we continue on the upward scale of improvement that we have recorded last year. And we're hoping this conversation is going to put us straight on that path so we are able to move along that trajectory. Colleagues, without wasting any more time, I'm going to go to my last speaker, if I'm not mistaken, which is Mapulani Kole. Mapulani Kole is the acting head in the presidency, acting DDG in the presidency's policy and research services. She is responsible for policy coordination and formulation, research, as well as leading implementation of the socio-economic impact assessment system. There's another new vocab we can put on our our radar. I think its acronym SEAAS, says, in government. She has been in the public service at senior level for the past 20 years. She has a vast experience of working in the 3 spheres of government, focusing on development planning, public policy, research, monitoring, and evaluation. She holds a qualification in water care, and it's not coincidence that this year the topic is around water. She also holds a qualification in business administration, leadership and development program, Master of Town and Regional Planning, and currently pursuing her PhD in public policy. She's also a guest lecturer to master's and honors students in public policy in 2 of the South African public universities. Colleagues, allow me to welcome to the mic Me Pulani Kole, who will be sharing with her the fruits of her work that is going to contribute to our knowledge here today. Me Pulani, without any further ado, please come in, Me.
Okay. Good afternoon, Program Director, and greetings to also our speakers and participants. Thank you very much for this session. It's a very important session that contributes to one of our important strategic priority of building a capable, ethical, and developmental state, and acknowledging that all the beautiful priorities that we have will not be implemented if we have not invested in our human resources and other resources to enhance these priorities. But the important part, the issues of discipline and integrity.
Ms. Pulani, please can I ask, hi, sorry to interrupt. Please can I ask that you just adjust your camera? You've got part of your face being cut off.
Oh, okay. All right. Apologies for that. Okay.
It's much, thank you
Is it
so
okay
much.
now? All right.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. So colleagues, one has been partly covered by Professor Mello, who was also part of the study that we did with NSG DPSA in 2024 around measuring productivity in the public service. So the reason why we had to conduct this study was that, as I indicated, one of our strategic priority of government is to build a capable, ethical, and developmental state to deliver quality services and improve socioeconomic conditions of our citizens. So, and most of the time, when we measure productivity, it's mainly focusing in the private sector. And in our case as government, sometimes it's done for a particular department or a sector. And we felt that, you know, there is a need to conduct the study to holistically look into the productivity of the public sector. And colleagues, if you look at the National Development Plan Vision 2030, in the next 4 years, the NDP in the chapter 13 has actually identified challenges of uneven performance across government, the tensions in political administrative interface. And I must say that in this area, we have the public service amendment legislation that was recently assented into law by the president to ensure that there is consistency in terms of the role of heads of department or accounting officers to be able to manage resources, both financial and human, in terms of advancing the priority and the institutional performance. But there are also challenges relating to skills, erosion of accountability, and fragmentation in the delivery of services. So the issue is that if you have good certain departments or institutions within the public service doing well and others are not, then it becomes a problem because we operate in a kind of a homogeneous environment. And therefore, it becomes difficult to realize the impact and the outcome of the work that we are doing. So I think, colleagues, it's very important to understand the secular government or the role of government in the basic economics context. I'm not an economist, but this secular government and firms, the model actually struck me, and it's something I think every public servant has to be exposed to. I think we need to understand that our role is not only about the delivery of services to what we term citizens. You know, there are different groups of society that we have to serve. But the important part is that there is kind of a relationship according to this model between government, firms, and households. And our role as government, we touch the firms and the household. We've got a responsibility to the firms as well as households, members of households. We've got a responsibility in terms of households to provide skills, to provide basic services, education, health. And when it comes to firms, we've got a responsibility of providing the necessary infrastructure. We've got a responsibility of ensuring that our laws are enabling for growth of firms so that they can create jobs. I think if we miss this, we'll forever be saying we want to create jobs. So firms need skills that we produce that comes from households so that they're able to translate raw materials into products, able to provide services, and those products and services are consumed by households. And households are working, so they are paying for those services. And firms pay back to government in the form of, taxes. And those taxes come back to us for us to be able to improve and maintain infrastructure, pay for those who work in the public service who are supposed to provide those basic services. So those are the dimensions that we need to understand in terms of our role as public service. And we have also a situation where we have a high wage public service bill. And it's like the shift is more now into paying salaries than having money to invest in our social and economic infrastructure. So we are going to have more people in offices, and we have challenges of service delivery that we are experiencing. And colleagues, one of the important evidence that we should really pay attention are the results that are coming from the Auditor General in terms of MFMA and PFMA outcomes. And all the challenges that the AGSA is raising always point to say leadership must pay attention to these challenges. So in terms of that, you have a situation now, there's a growth of municipalities relying on consultants to do financial statements. But when you go to the public finance management outcomes, audit outcomes, very few of national, provincial are relying on consultants to do financial statements, then we can see a mismatch between the two audit outcomes, where municipalities are increasingly relying and on the PFMA, public servants are able to do in-house. So that kind of a mismatch, it's one of the examples that speaks to uneven performance. And the Auditor General further do audits in terms of our infrastructure, poor contract management and cash flow, issues of delay of infrastructure or incomplete infrastructure. And we can witness that in our day-to-day, engagement, or as we drive around, that kind of a challenge. But also at a macro level, it means the construction sector declines and there are less jobs that are being created from that sector. But also now we are creating an environment that is not conducive for business. How do we expect a business to operate without water? How do we expect a business to operate when there are challenges of load reduction? There are challenges of your road infrastructure and your transportation system. So those are some of the things that we need to look into, not into our institutional performance where we tick the box and the like. So the study also emphasized around focusing on the outcome-based approach as opposed to our own outputs and institutional performance. So colleagues, the study was done by a multidisciplinary team, academic experts in economics, public administration, social science. Some were dealing with business processing, with engineering background, finance. So it was a very interesting team that worked on the research. And from the project management side, it was NSG, DPSA, ourselves, in partnership with GIZ through the SDGI program. And it was done in 2024. So there were different approaches, the collection of primary and secondary data, benchmarking with other countries. Professor Melo has covered them. Doing interviews with senior managers of departments. So the main issues that cut across, especially on the countries that we were benchmarked with, Canada, Singapore, Rwanda, Mauritius, Australia, United Kingdom, on various sections. What emerged from the result is that some of these countries, Canada, Singapore, they have a skilled workforce. And if you go into Singapore itself, in terms of how they recruit the best, the talent, and therefore they're able to also, pay well their public servants and the like. There's issues around ICT, employee wellness. Canada, for example, they do surveys in terms of employee satisfaction and motivation. With all this, they will not work if you only have skilled workforce, but issues of, ethics is very important, and the discipline, but also it's more about having a clear developmental plan for the country. All of us, we are busy doing something, but it's very important that the work that we do flowing from the National Development Plan, we need to have a clear path of success. There is this interesting book called The Asian Aspiration, where, for example, Taiwan had a very clear path of success in terms of land reform, in terms of issues of manufacturing. But one important aspect in that whole value chain was more of keep evolving. So colleagues, if you remember from 94, we started, somewhere, and if you look at the government reviews that are done by Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, we have achieved over 80% access to electricity, water, sanitation. But the important part is about continuous improvement. Now that we have over 80% of households having access, we are now faced with the challenge of water not reaching households from the taps. We have challenges of load reduction. So it's also more not to focus on yesterday's achievement, but us as public servants to be innovative, have desire to keep evolving. And how do we evolve, and looking at, issues of urbanization, population growth, that the money that we collect from firms via SARS must maintain the existing infrastructure, must expand to accommodate residential growth as well as businesses. And that's how, we have to keep evolving using, ICT to, provide faster services and the like. But the other challenge is that we are now going through the early retirement program to deal with, to reduce the wage bill. But the problem is that what are we doing with the money that we save from the early retirement? Are we using it to invest in infrastructure, or are we using it to create, other positions? But the other important issue, as we keep on evolving, which is very critical, do we still want to confront today's challenges with the old organizational structures that every department must have a DDD, a chief director, or do we go a different approach where also we look into the skills of today, your data scientists, IT, and all other skills that are needed to drive digital transformation and to better deliver services. So those are some of the issues that we need to think about as we confront the challenges, the socioeconomic challenges that we have, particularly around delivery of services and contributing to economic growth and job creation. So those are some of the critical issues that we should deal with. There's another aspect around legislative reviews, that we need a holistic approach on policy formulation and implementation. So there are certain reforms that we need to think about, and the president has always talked about reducing the regulatory burden, easing our laws to create an environment for economic growth and job creation. So those are some of the issues that we need to think about, not only having a skilled workforce and dealing with ethics, but also creating an environment for innovation, for creativity, but also for continuous improvement. So those are some of the issues that we put forth in terms of the reforms on how we recruit and attract the best talent and integrity. I think we need to look into our recruitment practices, but also it takes a leadership for us to achieve the developmental goals of our country, but also the issues of instilling discipline and ethical conduct. I think as much as we are fighting fraud and corruption, I think the prevention side of it we should be encouraged. And the proposal also talks about capacity building. And I think we need to also do some reforms in the manner in which we provide capacity building. not to tick the box that so many people attended a workshop or a training, but how do we take the best talent, assemble certain teams across government to address complex challenges that we have? Going back to the audit outcomes. So we have CFOs at national and provincial who are able to do financial statements and the like. And then we have municipalities who are unable. How do we assemble CFOs to assist municipalities, and taking advantage that we have different financial periods? Our financial year runs from 1st April to 31st March, municipalities 1st July to 30 June. So there won't be an issue that I can't help the municipality. I'm also busy with my, it's an auditing period kind of. So it's more not only about training, but how do we assemble different or officials, best talented officials to address complex issues that we are confronted with. So it becomes a training, but that is linked to delivery of certain outcomes. But also a clear vision, theory of change. We can't be doing everything, and everything, but how do we map out some practitioners, particularly under DPME, they will talk about the theory of change. How do we link different activities that will lead us to economic growth, job creation, tackling unemployment and the like? How do we bring all these things to work together and lead to better outcomes? So those are some of the issues that we need to think about. One didn't want to go to word for word kind of proposals, but more being practical and not finding ourselves, going back into ticking the box in terms of those proposals, but thinking from a policy coordination point of view, combining all different variables and interventions to address the persisting socioeconomic challenges that we are confronted with. And I must indicate that some of the countries that we were benchmarking and some that are not within this exercise, they started somewhere. Like if you look at Singapore, Prof. Melo spoke about Rwanda. Singapore also experienced colonization, and in this book of Asian aspiration, there were times where Singapore government used to come to Africa to learn from us, and now it's the other way around. But the book also says we have gone to Asia and other countries, and what are we doing about those learnings? But just to encourage you colleagues that, okay, as the country, we come from colonization, apartheid, but we can build, we can move, we can do what other countries are doing. And it's not like we are not doing anything. I think if you look at some of the results that the previous speaker spoke about, are giving us an encouragement that we can do more, we can keep on evolving, we can make a difference. So those are some of the results that are encouraging, that we are able to transform the public service. So I think it's very important that the benchmarking should not discourage us, and it's always best to compare yourself with the best, so that there is so that we can improve and we can also learn from the best, if one can say. But it's just also to look into the history of these countries, that they all started somewhere, having challenges of poverty, being issues of colonization and the like, but they were able to do it. And they are not also celebrating yesterday's achievement. They are on a continuous improvement path. And those are some of the things that we can do. We started in 94. We have done our best. There's a lot of positive things that we have done. And we should keep on evolving, take advantage of what is happening, the issues of digital transformation, AI, data science, and build on that, use what is happening, these new factors into improving the public service, so that we are able to address the challenges of unemployment and poverty, particularly our young citizens. So, Chair, without waste of time, that's some of the findings that emerged from the study. Thank you very much, colleagues and participants.
Thank you, Mekule. Much appreciated. I think we have taken also some provision from what you have shared with us. Importantly, it's the focusing on strategic priority of government to build a capable state that can deliver quality service, addressing socio-economic challenges, looking at productivity in the public sector from a holistic point of view, and even performance that productivity needs to address. Understanding the role of government in economic development, not only about delivery of services. I need to repeat this other statement. You say, not only about delivery of services, but also the relationship of government with firms. And you highlighted the whole value chain or ecosystem on how that works. I think the example you gave us was firms need skills from household to produce consumption, household consume, firm pay comes back to feed on the tax system that contributes to the services that needs to be delivered by government. You highlighted the issue on the high wage bill, the mismatch that comes with the high wage bill, AG audits, the declines on the construction sector, impacting on jobs, the environment we are creating to build the economy, need to look at such opposed to our own outputs. I think that's for me quite an underliner, where we're saying let's look at our role in socioeconomic challenges as opposed to looking at our outputs and institutional performance. And you reflected on what some of the benchmarks pointed to in terms of the developed countries, that critical is a skilled workforce that we are able to recruit, dealing with issues on employee satisfaction and motivation, ethics and discipline. Importantly, I think you highlighted the need to have a clear development plan with indicators that probably we could look into as productivity improvement, on continuous improvement on our successes, keep evolving using ICT, reduction of the wage bill, the savings there where it's been used, confronting today's challenges with organizational structures that enables such, holistic approach to policy formulation. I think we repeated the part on recruitment practices and instilling ethical conduct, capacity building, not just being training, but looking at how we harness the skills in the public service to assist the uneven performance, moving from ticking the boxes to practical resolution of challenges. I think you also ended again on saying developed countries have started somewhere. South Africa, let's start here. Let's look at what we can do to improve on our achievements, as well as to make sure that we keep evolving using the ICT, AI that is being affording opportunities to do things differently. Colleagues, that's in a nutshell some of my underlinings that I could pick up. I'm gonna look at Madam Kulsam to assist me in terms of the questions that we might be having, because I don't think I have that view from my side. We're gonna start with on the chat, and then if there are none, we will then go into posing some of the questions directly to the panelists. Madam, may I request that you assist with questions where they are?
Yes, Program Director. So you are welcome to click on the more icon there, and then the Q&A icon will pop up. You'll be able to see it. For now, fortunately, some of the questions have been answered. We do have a question from Mentha, and she says, "Good afternoon, Ms. Lelane. You highlighted productivity. Let's see. Okay, you've closed your screen. Okay, you've highlighted productivity. So I take it that this is for Ms. Lalane. You've highlighted productivity as it says Kaizen program as a powerful tool for continuous improvement. In the context of public service delivery, do you believe government departments can successfully implement Kaizen and eliminate operational waste by empowering frontline staff and managers alone? Or is it a formal investment in specializing process in industrial engineers, a non-negotiable requirement to see meaningful results? So this is for Ms. Lalani. And then also we have Desmond. He's saying, good day, oh, he was asking the speaker to adjust her camera. So that was Desmond. And then we have another question, or rather a statement from Motlokwa. I agree that there is a lot we can learn from the East Asian tigers in countries like Rwanda, but these countries also seem to have a different understanding or even application of democracy and governance. Could this also be the reason that they do better? Should we also perhaps change our constitution and multi-party systems? That is it. Thank you, Program Director. You are muted, Program Director.
Yeah, sitting in a hotel room without multiple screens does have its offsetting. Thank you, Madam Coulson. Colleagues, I'm gonna pose the questions to the panel. I know you said they have been answered, but I'm not able to see the answer. I think the screen there says we must answer live. So there is a specific question to Madame Lelani. We're gonna start with that one. And then we will go into the two other panel, or Mepulani Kole, to just help us reflect on the question on, is it a question of the type of democracy and governance that is at the center of how others do better than the others? Can I allow my panel members to come into those questions, please?
Thank you. Chair, may I go first? Thank you so much. And firstly, this is a brilliant question from Matteo. Yes, the answer is that Kaizen can be effective in any business across sector, with the public sector as well. And I just think it's very, very important for us to note that with the implementation of any productivity solution, one has to do it incrementally. So the model that we would propose for something like this would be to first train champions, we call them productivity champions, to implement this in a business and to gradually, bring the business into a more productive mindset, a lot of sensitization, and to celebrate quick wins as they come along. Because the big thing about productivity, and we started this morning with this, is, the perception about it. So one needs to change that mindset in both the public sector, but individually, all of us need to change that mindset, and that you want to improve your productivity. So then what we usually do is we train champions in each business, and they then disseminate these principles throughout the business. And it can work. It can work as long as you do it gradually and you bring everybody on board when you make these changes. So it's easier with frontline staff and managers. Now the question is actually threefold. If we look at only training frontline and management staff, it will obviously lead to improvement, but everybody needs to be onboarded on this, because you want to create a culture of a competitive team, someone who understands their impact on the bottom line. And no, by no means do you have to have industrial engineers go in and do this. Productivity SA uses this model as part of our mandate when we do business turnaround solutions. So when we identify specific areas in a business where we have to go and turn around at a very short pace, and we need to identify where are the bottlenecks immediately. So what would be the best solution to turn that business around? But there are many ways of implementing Kaizen. So I would suggest for public sector, and I'm very grateful for speaking at this platform, because every single business, every single person can benefit from understanding Kaizen principles, from understanding productivity champions training, understanding your impact on the bottom line at the end of the day, and then gradually implementing this. But don't forget to celebrate success, because if people feel that they are improving their productivity and nobody notices, that behavior will stop. So it is about gradual implementation, not once-off projects. So if one decides to implement this, implement it, for instance, in a pilot group, and then implement it constantly throughout public sector. And it will work. It will work, because obviously we implement Kaizen in different projects as Productivity SA, and it's a very successful thing. But I do think there's a lot of benefit in implementing these types of solutions, so that we have that productive mindset. But don't go straight into the absolute, top tier of implementation, where you would need an engineer to explain to you. Productivity awareness starts at very basic levels, and we have the ability to create awareness on productivity, your impact on the bottom line, understanding productivity, and looking at areas, for instance, where you can improve your productivity. Start with small things. Select 5 things, for instance, visible improvements, and then congratulate your teams on those improvements. It's important to also always have a baseline in any project that we do. Productivity related project, you have to have a baseline to work from. As our chair stated earlier in the introduction as well, this is a baseline is something that you work from so that you can improve on it. And by no means does the fact that we've improved on our productivity mean that now we're good to go, we can become complacent now. It does not. It just says that people's perceptions are changing towards us and towards our government's productivity, and towards now we have to use this information and create those perceptions into projects that are measurable, so that we can showcase, so that it can be replicated. So this is an absolute process. It's something that cannot be administered once off, but there is absolute value in implementing methodology that you can measure. Because if you have a baseline, and you implement a Kaizen solution, and you measure improvement, and then the next year you measure improvement, you can see, are there bottlenecks, are there improvement areas? So an absolute yes, Kaizen can work for public sector as well, but very important as to how it is done. It has to be done in a partnership ecosystem, not a once-off project. And it needs to be consistently measured year on year. And people need to be congratulated at award ceremonies and be excited about the improvement. And then it will work. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Lalani. We will look forward to that understanding training and the congratulations when we reach that milestone. Oh, now I'm reminded again of my video. Can I give over to Mepulani Kole, and then we can quickly have our crunch question because we are running a bit out of time. If we can just be brief about that. Mepulani Kole.
Okay, thank you very much, Program Director, and to the questions that has been raised. I think what is important when we learn from this country is to also tailor-made the lessons, to the South African context. Is not to, want to apply everything that we learn, but how do we bring the lessons in terms of our context. And I think we need to also appreciate democracy, particularly also in terms of the voice of our citizens and holding us accountable and protection of human rights and understanding the history of where we come from. So I think, so when we learn from these countries, I think it's very important that we adapt to our circumstances. And in the main, it's about better delivery of our services and about continuous improvement. So we don't have to copy everything, but more in terms of using those lessons to improve our circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mepulani. Thank you, Mepulani Kole. I'm going to quickly go to Prof. Colleagues, we are running out of time, unfortunately. This is not the end of this conversation. There's a series of these conversations that we will be having throughout the course of this year. And some of the issues we will begin to delve much deeper into during some of those opportunities. Just a quick question to Prof. Mello. Moving away from measuring our own output and institutional performance, as Mepulani has raised, what do we then measure to improve productivity for the public sector? What would you say are the key things that we need to measure, with understanding that it's not about how we are delivering, it's not about how institutions are performing, but looking at the bigger picture? Prof, in 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wish you could give me more time here, but I appreciate that we do not have time. Now, in terms of measurement, remember, productivity is more about people. Productivity is about processes. So productivity is also about the satisfaction of customers. Now, if we look at the processes that we have, and we are able to streamline them, and we're able to measure, can we measure productivity at an individual level to say this is what is expected out of an individual in this occupational class? Most importantly, I just mentioned that productivity is about people. To what extent are our employees engaged? We have to measure the level of engagement of our employees. We have to measure the satisfaction level of our employees. The more engaged the employees are and satisfied are, the more they associate themselves with the goals of the organization, the more they are able also to be productive. And therefore, it means that apart from measuring their own levels of engagement, we need to also to support them more in terms of aspects relating to wellness as well. Now, I also indicated that productivity is also in the eyes of the recipients of the services. To what extent are these recipients happy with the services that we deliver? So, in a nutshell, let us look at the possibility of measuring any or every element of the value chain. If we do that, then we would be able to say that we are measuring productivity in its entirety and not just the outputs at the end of the year, at the end of the quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And I'm sure Mekule would want to come in there, but unfortunately, ma'am, there isn't much time. And like I indicated, there will be time to delve much deeper into the subject. I think down the line, there will be opportunities that we come back and we continue this conversation. Colleagues, join me in extending our sincere appreciation to our esteemed panelists for their thoughtful and enlightening contribution. I'm going to move over to the last speaker for the day, which is Acting DDG, Dr. Patrick Sokela, just to help us with the closing remarks and make sure that we are able to wrap up this conversation, and we will pick up in our next session or our next series of taking this conversation much deeper. Dr. Sokela, please come to the mic, if I may request.
Thank you very much, Mamelo. I hope that I'm audible.
You are audible, Doctor.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to switch on your video. Thank you.
Colleagues, allow me to thank our panelists from our partners. As DPSA, we have listened, the experts and colleagues have spoken. We are understanding the message and the importance of productivity. This is quite a critical intervention. So our task is to ensure that we can take these input suggestions and views into actionable plans. And I'm sure that Team DPSA, working with the partners, are ready to take this work to the next level. But as DPSA, we do appreciate your participation, including the back office of the NSG. We appreciate the infrastructure that you have provided. We appreciate the participation of all organs of state, members of the public, private and public institutions. DPSA is really committed in terms of driving the creation of a capable, ethical, and a developmental state, and we look forward to elevating this effort to the next level. And the team at DPSA, I'm sure we are up to the task to take this effort to the next level. Without further ado, allow me to conclude by thanking all of you, and we're looking forward to actioning what came out of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, that's the end of the session. Thank you so much, Doctor. Madam Coulson, back to you, Madam. We will advise of the next series as we advertise the work that needs to go forward.
Thank you.